Hello everybody around the world, welcome back to Dark Matter 1801. This is actually our first post this year and it's worth the wait because you're actually going to learn a lot. There's a lot of brand new information that we have for you today. So the title of this episode is called Ancient Egyptian Pharaohs and the theme is Anglo-Saxon whites and Arab images of ancient Egypt does not actually match their cartouche name, because as we found in our previous episode, the ancient Egyptian culture, the ancient Egyptian language, the hieroglyphs, the cartouche, etc. is 100% Yoruba, and we're going to provide further evidence for you. Now, we have a pharaoh who is actually the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt called Oremhem. We're going to look into him because as we found, Oremhem is actually a fictitious character and a fabrication by Egyptologists, because Oremhem is actually using Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten's cartouche name, because Oremhem appears in number 74 in the Abydos King list. We revisit Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, again to show that he was never a heretic king. He did not invent the concept of one god. There was no religion called Aten, all those nonsense. They were all fabricated by Egyptologists. And we provide more information as to where he was actually buried, together with his wife, whose real name is Ifatiti or Titi Beora Aton. Ifa, aka Nefertiti, was actually buried. Then their son, whose real name is Mimo Beora Aton, who later took the name during his reign Tutu Mera Moshe. We're going to show you where his burial chamber is as well, because as we found, the tomb which was discovered by Howard Carter in 1922 was actually a massive hoax. Tutu-Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was never buried there. So we're going to provide that information for you, and we have other information for you as well. So this is really a very exciting content today. So please stay tuned. Now, let's give you some brief history. We have a pharaoh on the right hand side. He's known as Amenhotep III, but that is not actually his name. And then on the left hand side, this is his cartouche name. Now, the pharaoh on the right hand side, he's actually the father of Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, and the grandfather of Tutu-Aten, who later took the name Tutu Mera Moshe. This is his grandfather here, and then on the left hand side is his cartouche name. Now, the reason why I've actually introduced him is because of the bowl, because this is where Tutun, aka Tutankhamun, also got his name from, because his grandfather was known as Mimo, and also Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, was also known as Mimo as well, if you check their cartouche name. Now, to the left hand side, we have the pharaoh's cartouche name. We're going to translate his cartouche name for you. We start with the bowl at the bottom, which means Mimo, M-I-M-U, which stands for I know. That's what it means. And then in the middle, we have the kind of like the Isis figure, which we'd already mentioned in our previous episode. It's absolutely got nothing to do with Ma'at. That figure stands for Are, A-R-E. It's a standalone figure, but it's used together with Ra at the top. So it translates to Arare. So you start with the A first, then you insert the Ra, then it finishes with R-E. So it becomes Arare, which means oneself. So his name, his full name is Mimo Arare. So his name is not Amenhotep III. and that was just invented by Egyptologists. Mimo means I know, Arare means oneself, so I know oneself, that's what his name translates to. And his reign period was from 1388 BC to 1351 BC. And the pharaoh to my right hand side, his father, is whose face is that of the Sphinx, known as Otito Moshe, whose cartouche name reads Mira Wilra Aton, aka Thutmose IV. This is his son here to my right hand side. And we also have another statue of him as well to the right hand side, so that you can actually look at him very closely. He's black, he's Yoruba, Asian king, as his name actually suggests. And he is the 8th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. Now, to my left hand side is a pharaoh who Egyptologists say is Oremheb. Honestly, I'm not making this up. This is exactly what they said. He is not Oremheb. As we said, Oremheb is a fictitious character and a fabrication. And then on the right hand side, you can also see his cartouche name on the far right. And next to his cartouche name is another model of him. That's the actual pharaoh. You can see him. He's black. He's Yoruba Asian king, as we're going to translate his name for you. Now, the cartouche on the far right, we have the kind of like a flag looking to the left hand side. That stands for Jere, which means J-E-R-E. And Jere in ancient Egyptian language means to gain. On the right of Jere, we have the ant, which stands for Beru. And then above, we have the sun. So that's Berura, perfect rising sun. Below the ant, we have the like a comb sign, which means Me, which was first introduced by Meni, who was the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. And then we have the Ni sign, which was also introduced by Meni, who was the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. Then we have the bird feather next to it, which was also introduced by Meni, who is the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. Then below we have the Ni, which is the water sign, and then right above we have Ra, so that translates as a wrong generation of. And then above the water sign we have the Sheti symbol, which stands for Sheti, Tasheti in Nubia. So his full name is Jere Wilra Meni Okun Iran Sheti. Jere means to gain, Beura means perfect rising sun, Meni means man or the established one, Okun means strength, ability and power, and then finally he uses at the bottom generation of Sheti. And Tasheti is in Nubia, which was the old kingdom before the new kingdom was set up by Meni Okun, who was the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. So the pharaoh to my left hand side is not Oremheb, but Jere Berura Meni Okun Iran Sheti. So you can see how desperate Egyptologists are. They're just making up things as they go along. He is the 6th pharaoh of the 21st dynasty of Egypt. So his reign period was from 986 BC to 967 BC. So you can see quite clearly that the 18th dynasty never ended, the 19th dynasty never ended, the 20th dynasty never ended, the 21st dynasty never ended. Dynasties were created by Egyptologists and were fabricated because the 18th dynasty never ended, because we have a pharaoh whose name is Berura as well, which is the same as Akhenaten's name as well. Now, to my left hand side, this is actually the real pharaoh Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. He is the 9th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, and to the right is his cartouche name. This is who they gave Oremheb's cartouche to. So, but that cartouche does not belong to Oremheb, but actually belongs to Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. We're going to translate, if you haven't seen our previous video, we're going to translate his name for you in ancient Egyptian language again here today. First, we start with the hand sign. You can see the hand holding the key. That stands for Akin, A-K-I-N in ancient Egyptian language. And Akin basically means brave. Below Akin, we have the ant, which stands for Beru, perfect rise. And then above, you have Ra, so that's translated as Beru Ra, which means perfect rising sun. And then we have 3 lines just below the ant, which stands for Aten. Like we said, Aten has got nothing whatsoever to do with a religion called Aten, or those who are fabricated by Egyptologists. Aten basically means a returning place in ancient Egyptian language. And then at the bottom, we have the water sign, which means Ni and I. And then we have the small Ra just on the far right. That translates as Iran. And then above the water sign, we have the curve shape, which stands for Sheti. So in fact, Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, was the first pharaoh in history to actually include Sheti inside his cartouche name. So he was never a heretic king. That story was fabricated entirely by Egyptologists. And then on the far left again, we have another statue of him. And you can see quite clearly that he's actually got a snake on his forehead. And that snake is a representation of Olorun, aka Horus. This is why Pharaoh carried that snake on their forehead, because it's a representation of their god. So he was never a heretic king. That story was fabricated entirely by Egyptologists. Again, as you can see, this is a depiction of Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten in the walls of Egypt. You can see him quite clearly. First, he's got a snake on his forehead. I'd like to emphasize, which is a representation of Olorun, aka Horus. Then you can see him actually holding a stick. You know, at the edge of the stick, you can see the falcon, and then you can see the sun above the falcon. And then you can see a calabash on top of the stick. So he's using that to actually pay a homage to Olorun, aka Horus, who is their god. Then above him we have 2 cartouche. You can see quite clearly the first cartouche is his name. So I'm not going to translate that because I've already done that. But let's look at the other cartouche, his second name, because we're able to actually find his second name in Amana, even though part of the cartouche have actually been erased by Egyptologists. We were still able to find some of his cartouche name in his temple in Amana. So we have the Misai, which was first introduced by Meni, who was the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. Below the Mi sign, we have the Ni sign, which is the water sign. This is his second cartouche I want you to concentrate on. Then we have the Ni sign, which is the water sign, which translates to Meni, who has he has the exact name as the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. Then we've got the bird feather, which stands for Okun, O-K-U-N, which is strength, ability, and power. And then you can now see at the bottom, if you go to the bottom, this is the second cartouche, at the bottom you can actually see the bow, which stands for Mimo, M-I-M-U. So remember when we took you through Amenhotep, who is Aten's father. Don't forget his name as well was Mimo, with the bow. So Pharaoh Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten's other name, is also Mimo as well. So his other name is Meni, which stands for man or established one. Okun, which means strength, ability, and power. And his other name is also Mimo as well, which we're going to identify in his complex, which today is known as Amana, but back then was known as the Akhenaten Temple. And also, you can also see to my left hand side, this is Akhenaten's ring. And you can actually see quite clearly that his name is actually written on the ring, which has Akinwewura Aton Iran Sheti. You can see his ring on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side, this is a relief on the walls in Amana, known during those periods as Akhenaten Temple, and you can see him quite clearly. That's him. He's actually paying homage to Ra, because he was always a Ra worshipper. So there was no religion called Aten in the history of ancient Egypt. And then you can also see the next picture of him. You can actually see him on the left hand side. You can see the snake in front of his head, which is a representation of Olorun, aka Horus. And then on the right is his cartouche name, which reads Akinwewura Aton Iran Sheti. It's there for everybody to see. Now, I want our viewers to pay very, very close attention here, because here is a relief. This relief is actually in Akhenaten's temple in Amana. It was known during those periods as Akhenaten Temple, but it's today called Amana. So this relief is actually in Amana. Now, you need to really focus here. To the right, at the very top, is the sun. Okay? In between the sun, we have the snake. Now, you can see the snake wrapped around the key. That key is not called Ankh. That key is actually called Kokoro in ancient Egyptian language. And that key is the key to heaven and hell. Now, we now have a ray coming out of the sun, kind of like a pharaoh's hand coming out of the sun. And at the end, we still have the key, that Kokoro. And this is in Akhenaten's temple in Amana. Can you see? So you can see him paying a homage to Ra. So this is Olorun, aka Horus, or Amun-Ra, at his temple in Amana, known during this period as Akhenaten Temple. So you can see quite clearly that there was no religion called Aten. Aten basically was their surname, and the entire story was actually fabricated by Egyptologists. Like we said, it's not uncommon for pharaohs to look for good locations to build a temple. You know, Akhenaten wasn't the first to do it, and he wasn't the last to do it neither. Now, behind Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, is his wife, known as Titi Wewura Aton Iran Ifa. That is her full name. But for short, she's known as Ifa Titi, aka Nefertiti. Now, if you look above her, you actually see two big cartouches and two small cartouches. That is actually exactly what is written on her tombstone, just above her name. And then behind her is her children, two of her children, who have their cartouche up. But that cartouche would have most probably been altered. Now, the sun, to the far right of the sun, would have been Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. That would have been his name. His name would have been written on the far right of the sun, which Egyptology had been erasing his name throughout Egypt. Anyway, so as you can see quite clearly, there was no religion called Aten. The whole story was actually fabricated by Egyptologists. And we're going to actually show you the tombstone. We're going to show you her tombstone in a minute. So look at it very closely. Above Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti, is two big cartouches and two small cartouches. The two big cartouches are actually paying a homage to our ancestors, and at the bottom of the two big cartouche is her name, and then she's also got her name written to the left. The two small cartouches to the left, it's also her name as well, which will translate for you in a minute. Now you can see to the left, this is actually Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti's tombstone that was made for her by her husband. The relief that we just showed you previously above her name, this is exactly what was written in her tombstone. So you can see there's two big cartouches in front of the tombstone, and then on the side those two big cartouches are also replicated as well, and then at the bottom is two small cartouches which her name is also written on it as well. And the two big cartouche on the left is what is shown also on the right. We just wanted to show you. So you can see the two big cartouches are also on the right hand side of us here. So on the far right, you can actually see that Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti, is actually paying a homage to our ancestors. So she starts first with Ra, Olorun, aka Horus. She starts with him first. So you can see the falcon, you can see the sun above the falcon, and then you can see the snake also coming out of the sun. So that is not Aten or any religion called Aten. That is Olorun, aka Horus, being depicted in her cartouche. Just beside Olorun, we have two small cartouches, which reads Kara twice. Kara, Kara. Like we said in our previous episode, Ifatiti also comes from a line and generation of pharaohs as well, which goes back to the 3rd dynasty of Egypt. So Ka itself is a representation of Olorun, so is Ra. That's why pharaohs sometimes use the name Kara, which basically means straightforward. So you can see quite clearly there was no religion called Aten. Now, at the bottom, we're still talking about the right side of the cartouche. At the bottom, we can also give you an additional name of what Ifatiti was called. As you can see at the bottom, we have two. So you have, like, it's a calabash actually, which is facing down, because her son is also called Tutu, T-U-T-U. So the calabash at the bottom is T-U, which is two. Okay, at the bottom two, which is like a calabash facing downwards. In fact, her son is actually called Tutu. So that calabash represents two, just one. If you have two of the calabash facing down, that means Tutu. So she's only got one, so that means two, T-U. Okay? Then we have Ra at the top. So Tura, yeah? And then in the middle we have the Ka symbol. So her name is also Turaka. Turaka. So that is T-U-R-A-K-A, which means to loosen up. That's exactly what it means. And then the cartouche next to it, at the bottom, she's also got an additional name as well, which is you have the calabash facing down, which means T-U. Below the calabash, you have the ni sign, so that's Tuni. Yeah, Tunira. Tunira, which means to basically a cool person. Tunira means a cool person in ancient Egyptian language. And just to the right, you can see the bird feather, which means Okun, O-K-U-N, which stands for strength, ability, and power. Remember we told you that Akhenaten's other name also was Meni, he bears exactly the same name as the pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, known as Menioku. Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten's name, was also Menioku as well. And then his wife also is known as Tunera Oknu, because Oknu is also their name, so you can actually see it quite clearly. So there was no religion called Aten, it was actually fabricated by Egyptologists. And also on the far left, you can actually see her tombstone as well. So you got two big cartouches at the top, and you got two small cartouches at the bottom. And just on the side at the bottom is also her cartouche name. And then on the far right is Ifatiti herself. That is exactly how she looks like. Now, on the left hand side is Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti's cartouche name. This cartouche name is also included in her tombstone that we just showed you previously at the bottom to the right. Now we're going to translate her cartouche name for you. First, you can see like the Ifa symbol. We put the Ifa symbol just next to her cartouche name, and at the bottom you can also see a music instrument. Now, that music instrument is the one that actually represents Ifa, is a music instrument. Back in ancient Egypt, they had two instruments which were used to scrape the pulp out of a green calabash, and those same two instruments were also used to shave the head of the priests and priestess of Ifa during that time. So that is why that music instrument represents Ifa inside the cartouche name. And also the calabash is also used to make an offering to God. So we just wanted to give you a brief history as to where the Ifa symbol, the history of Ifa symbol, where it actually comes from. Then you can also see a catapult at the bottom. So now we're going to translate Ifatiti's name for you. We've done it previously in our previous episode, but we're just going to repeat it for you here if this is the first time that you're actually watching one of our content. So we're going to start from the bottom, but we're not going to start from Ni, N-I, which is the water sign. We're actually going to start just above. You can see the Y-shape sign. That Y-shape sign is actually a catapult. It means offer in ancient Egyptian language. It was actually introduced by Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti, because she was an Ifa priestess. Now, that offer in ancient Egyptian language is the catapult. Now, with a catapult, you have to pull it until it actually hits its target. The word until, that's where her name Titi actually comes from, because Titi means until in ancient Egyptian language. So that catapult inside the cartouche name represents Titi. So T-I-T-I is actually her first name, which represents the catapult. Then you got the ant at the top. That ant represents Beru plus the sun, Ra, so Beru Ra, which means perfect rising sun. Then we come back to the three lines, which means Atum. Atum basically means a returning place in ancient Egyptian language, and it's got nothing whatsoever to do with religion. It's a returning place, that is what it means. And then at the bottom, we have to go back again to the bottom. So at the bottom of the cartouche, we have the Ni, which is the water sign, and then we have the Ra. So that translates as Nira, but you don't pronounce it like that. It's pronounced Iran. So you start with the I first, then you put the Ra in, then you finish it with N. So Iran in ancient Egyptian language means generation of. And then she's got the Ifa symbol to the far right, which is the ancient Egyptian Yoruba music, which was used to represent Ifa back in ancient Egypt. So her full name is Titi, T-I-T-I, which means until, Birura, which means perfect rising sun, Atom, which means a returning place, Iran, which means generation of. Then she uses Ifa, which is which represents the ancient Egyptian Yoruba music instrument. And then on the right hand side, this is her. This is exactly how she looks like. Now, this relief that we're actually looking at is actually a relief from Akhenaten's temple in Amana. I want you to pay very close attention to this relief here. This is actually Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti's funeral procession. If you look, you can actually see the sun shining above her mummy. You can see her mummy just after the ray coming out of the sun. You can actually see her mummy there. That is actually Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti. Her mummy is actually being wrapped. Then you got 3 blankets that were going to be used to actually transfer her to her burial place. So this is actually her funeral procession. So at the top is Ra with the gaze coming out of the sun and the key. So there was no religion, like we said, called Aten. On the right hand side, you can actually see Egyptologists have been erasing names because they're trying to hide their identity. You can see Akhenaten. His face is also being rubbed off in that relief. And behind him is a son, actually, whose real name is Mira Beura Aton, or Tutu Mira Moshe, aka Akhenaten. He was actually 23 years old in that relief. So Tutankhamun, aka Tutankhamun, was never ever a boy king. So you can see this is actually Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti's funeral procession. You can see her mummy being wrapped up, and you can see 3 blankets that they're going to use to transfer her to her burial place, which we're going to actually show you later. Also, just above Akhenaten is a cartouche name. Even though the cartouche is not clear, you can actually see there's 2 big cartouches just above Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. So the left of the cartouche is actually his son's name, and that was his name that he was using at this time. This is basically in Amana. So the cartouche name is not clear, you can't see it, but you can actually see the bowl, and you can actually see the 3 lines as well. So remember we told you that aka Tutankhamun's name was also Mimo, because his grandfather was known as Mimo. Even Akhenaten, his father, was also known as Mimo as well. So you can see the bowl, and then you can see the 3 lines. But the rest is not clear, but that's his name. And then beside Tutankhamun's name is his father's name, where you can also see the bowl as well. Can you see quite clearly the bowl? We're going to show you the next section, but you can actually see it here as well. So this is Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti's funeral procession. That is her mummy, the son gazing over her mummy, and those are 3 blankets that they're going to use to transfer her to her burial place. And we know exactly where she was buried. She was actually buried in a complex first before Akhenaten, because she died at the age of 58, and Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, actually died 5 years later. So it was after Akhenaten died, that's when Tutankhamun, known to the world as Tutankhamun, took the throne. He took the throne at exactly 28 years old. So he was never a boy king. And to the left would have been the name of his son and him. Although it's not clear, but you can still see parts of their cartouche name. And then to the right hand side would have been how the 2 cartouches would have looked like exactly. So to the left, to the far left of the wall, you can actually see aka Tutankhamun's name. You can actually see it, because if you look at the bottom at the far left, you can actually see the bowl, which means Mimo, M-I-M-U, And you can also see the 3 lines as well, which means Aten, but the rest is not actually clear. This is how we were able to identify that that's actually his name. And then next to the cartouche on the left is his dad's name, and you can also see the bowl as well, because his father, Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, other name was also Mim as well. That bowl, there's a calabash, a big calabash that is actually facing upwards, and then to the right is both their names. So the first cartouche is actually cartouche of aka Tutankhamun, and this was actually in Amarna. So there was no religion called Aten, because you have the bowl. This is, we translate aka Tutankhamun's name for you. So you have the bowl. It starts with the bowl at the bottom, which means Mimo. Then you have Berura, which means perfect rising sun, and then you have 3 lines at the bottom, which means Aten, which translates to a returning place. So Mimo means I know, Berura means perfect rising sun, Aten means a returning place. So that was Tutu Aten's cartouche name in Amarna. So if there was a religion called Aten, why is Ra at the top of his cartouche name? They got Ra at the top of his cartouche name, so there was no religion called Aten. That story was fabricated entirely by Egyptologists. And next to the cartouche is his other, that is his father's other cartouche name, which appears on the walls in Amarna. So you got the bowl. He himself is known as Mimo as well, M-I-M-U, I know. And then at the top, you got Me, which was first introduced by Meni, who was the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. Then you got Ni, so Meni, as in man, or the established one. And then you got the bed feather, which stands for OKUN, which is strength, ability, and power. So we told you that Akhenaten's other name also was Meni Okun. So this cartouche doesn't belong to anybody called Oremhem. Oremhem basically was a fabrication. As you can see, the image that they're showing of Oremhem does not fit the cartouche name, because the cartouche name is Yoruba 100%. So you can see it quite clearly, because if they say that Tutu Aten was worshipping Aten, so what is his cartouche name when he was worshipping Aten? And then what is his cartouche name when he was worshipping Amin? Excuse me. What was his cartouche name when he was worshipping Aten? And what was his cartouche name when he was worshipping Amin? So you can see that the story was fabricated. There was no Aten all along. All that story was fabricated entirely. Now, this is another relief in Akhenaten Temple in Amarna, known during this period as Akhenaten Temple. You can see on the left-hand side is Akhenaten holding his son, and then on the right-hand side is his wife, Nefertiti, known to the world as Nefertiti, and above them is their names. So Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, would have had 2 big cartouches and 2 small cartouches, which we're going to show you later on. And then on the right hand side, we already showed you exactly how Nefertiti, known to the world as Nefertiti's cartouche name looks like, and even her tombstone as well. And you can see both of them, they've got snake on their forehead. Above them is the sun. In the middle of the sun is the snake. The snake is wrapped around a key called kokoro and not ankh in ancient Egyptian language. And then you have the pharaoh's hand coming out of the sun, with also the key holding it, with the hand holding the key. So, and this is in Amarna. So there was no religion called Aten. They've always been worshipping Ra from the start. So the total story about but he was having an argument with the priest because he wanted to set up the concept of one God and all that kind of rubbish. It was fabricated, and even the art itself are exactly the same. The art did change from the first dynasty of Egypt right through to when Alexander stepped foot on Egypt. The art was exactly the same. So we don't know what Egyptologists are talking about. Now, to my left hand side is Zahid Hawass. He was the former Minister of Tourism and Antiquities of Egypt. You can see him quite clearly. He's standing in front of the Sphinx, giving the impression as if his face is that of the Sphinx, or that his generation are ancient Egyptian. Zahid Hawass, as far as we're concerned, is a racist and a crook. But the reason why we've actually introduced him is because of the religion that he's been talking about as Aten, which is really, really funny. Every time we hear him mention Aten, we just laugh. It is so, so funny, because on the right hand side is exactly what Aten, known to the world as Akhenaten, was worshipping in his temple in a manner known during this period as Akhenaten Temple. So what it means is, I am life and I am the giver of life. To understand me is to understand death. That is exactly what it means. And this here, to my right hand side, this is Olorun, aka Horus. This is a depiction of him. This is Amun-Ra. So this has got nothing whatsoever to do with a religion called Aten. The whole basis of Aten was fabricated by Egyptologists from beginning to end. You can see quite clearly, you can see the snake, you can see the sun, you can see the snake wrapped around, you can see the key wrapped around the snake, and then you can see the ray coming out with the key at the end of it. So this is exactly what Akhenaten and his wife and his children were worshipping in temples in a manner. So for this man here, this crook here, to refer this as Aten, it's actually an insult, because it's actually quite stupid, to be honest, and laughable as well, if you come to look at it, because on the right hand side is Olorun, aka Horus. That's a depiction of him. It's quite clear. This is why we introduce Zahid Hawass here. He's a crook. Now, here is the real face of the Sphinx. It is not the face of Zahid Hawass, nor is it the face of any of his generation. Because we know, we're going to do another video on it, we know exactly where the Ottoman Empire actually came from and where they started. So they didn't even land in Egypt until after the fall of Constantinople in 1453. So Zahid Hawass is a Turk. They're from the Ottoman Empire. So the current inhabitants of Egypt are not ancient Egyptian. This is the real face of the Sphinx. This is exactly how the Sphinx looked like before it was hacked off by Egyptologists. To the left is his cartouche name, and we're actually going to make a standalone video on this specific pharaoh. He is the grandfather of Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, and his son is Mimo Arare, known to the world as Amenhotep III. You can see him on the right hand side. This is exactly how the Sphinx looks like. Back in ancient Egypt, he was known as Utito Moshe. He was also known as Alala, the dreamer. So it was his story that they stole and inserted into the Bible. This is him here. This is exactly how the Sphinx looked like. To the left is his cartouche name. So we have the Me, which was first introduced by Meni, who is the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, and then we have Ra above Me. So his first name is Mira, which means I bought it. And then you have the ant, which stands for Meru. Then you have the sun, Merura, which means perfect rising sun. And then below you have the three lines, which stands for Aten. Remember we told you that Aten has got nothing whatsoever to do with a religion called Aten has got nothing to do with a religion called Aten or something like that. It's actually Aten means a returning place. Now, this picture was actually taken around 1866. This is the last picture of the Sphinx that was taken before the face was hacked off. It wasn't hacked off by Napoleon Bonaparte, who invaded Egypt in 1799. It wasn't done by him, nor was it done by any Arab or something like that in the 14th century. All those was fabricated. The face was hacked off sometime after 1866, because this is exactly how the Sphinx looked like. The beard, half of it had fallen off. That half is actually currently in the British Museum, and then you can actually see that somebody was holding the beard at the bottom, so they were trying to attach it. So they took a picture of it, and then the other part of his beard was actually hacked up later on with his face. So this is in here. This is exactly how. This is the last known picture of the Sphinx, and originally the Sphinx was a Black Panther. He was the one who changed it to his face, and he wrote it in his dream Stella. So this is the face of the Sphinx, Otito Moshe, whose cartouche name reads Mira Ura Ato, aka Thutmose the Fourth. This is him here. This is exactly how the Sphinx looked like. So it's not Zahid Hawa's face or generations of him or his family or his great grandfather. They've got nothing to do with this pharaoh. This pharaoh here is Yoruba 100%, because that's what his name, as his name actually suggests. And also, if you note, the first picture that arrived in the entire world was actually done by a Frenchman in 1826 or 1827. Can you see? So the face of the Sphinx was taken after 1826 or 1827. But we believe that this picture of the Sphinx was actually taken in 1866, around when Carl Richard Lepsus was there, and also Augustin Mario, because he was in Egypt during that period as well. So this is the last known picture of the Sphinx before his face was hacked off. So it wasn't hacked off by Napoleon's men, nor was it hacked off by any Arab. It was actually hacked off by Egyptologists themselves, because they had a game plan in mind. And again, to my left hand side, this is what Akin Aten, Tutu Aten and Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti, I've been worshipping all along. We put it here so that you don't have any delusions or anything like that. Actually, like we said, this is a representation of Olong, and his full name is Olong Shepataki Okugade. Olong means Lord of the Universe, Shepataki means larger than life, Okugade means dead, rise up in rank to wear a crown. That is exactly what his full name is. And then on the right hand side, you can actually see Ifatiti. This is actually in a funeral complex, which we're actually going to show you. This relief is not actually in Amana, but actually in a funeral complex, which we're going to show you a bit later on. So you can see her. This is Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti. On the right hand side, she's kneeling down and she's paying a homage to Ra, which is on my left hand side. So this is exactly what she's worshipping. We want to make sure, because we want to put this specific story to rest, that Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, was never a heretic king. We want to finish that story today. And again, to my left hand side is actually the same relief of Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti, paying the homage to Ra, Olong, aka Horus. And then on the right hand side, you can actually see the falcon god himself, Olong, aka Horus. You can see him there depict himself as a falcon with the double crown, because he was actually the first to wear the double crown in the history of ancient Egypt. And you can actually see the sun, and you can see the snake, and you can see the key wrapped around the snake. And he's actually standing on top of his dad, who is Osiri, aka Osiris, because Osiris depicts himself as a cow. He personifies a cow. So this is why Osiris normally sometimes is represented by a cow, because his personification is a cow. And to my left hand side, this is actually Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti. This is actually the last known relief that was made for her before she actually passed away. Like we said, she died at the age of 58. And if you look very closely at her hat, you can actually see two snakes coming out of it. So she's not only got one representation of Olong, aka Horus, she's got two representation of Olong, aka Horus. And then on the right hand side, that is a depiction of Horus himself. So this is who the ancient Egyptians worship. Basically, this is their god. So, like we said, there was no religion called Aten. And to my left hand side, there is actually a relief. This relief actually goes back to the first dynasty of Egypt. And you can see quite clearly, you can see the sun. You can see like the ray, or like the hand coming out of the sun. Then you can see Olong, aka Horus, solar boats. And then you can see them carrying the sun. You can see it quite clearly on the left hand side. So this relief goes back to the first dynasty of Egypt. You can see it quite clearly. And then on the right hand side, you can also see a depiction of Olong, aka Horus, inside the pyramid. You can see it quite clearly. You can see the falcon, you can see the sun above his head, and you can see the snake coming out of the sun. And the reason why they normally depict him inside the pyramid, because he was the one who built the pyramids of Giza. He built the 3 big pyramids of Giza and the 3 small ones. The 3 big ones stands for heaven, and the 3 small ones basically stands for hell. Everybody in ancient Egypt knew who actually built the pyramids of Giza. The only person who didn't know who built the pyramids are Egyptologists and the races themselves. But everybody back in ancient Egypt knew who built the pyramid of Giza, and also who built the Sphinx as well, which was originally a black panther to commemorate his dad, Osiri, known as Okunku, during those times. And also you can see to my right hand side, this is actually aka Ramsey II. This is the back of him. This is a statue with him, with the back of him showing. And you can actually see quite clearly that he actually starts also with Olorun, aka Horus, Amun-Ra. You can see the falcon, and then you can see the sun, and then you can see the snake. So he actually starts with two, not one, but two Olorun. And then below Olorun is Osiri, aka Osiris. And also in those cartoons, he also pays a homage to his grandfather, because his grandfather is Tutankhamun, aka Tutankhamun. That's his grandfather, because you can see the corpse, you can see the two corpses facing down, which is Tutu. And they can also see the ants, because sometimes ancient Egyptians also depict the ants with a wing coming out of it. So that's he's paying a homage to his grandfather. And then below is 4 names of him. And then on the left hand side is his cartouche name. So his name is not actually Ramsey II, as we mentioned previously. His name is actually Anu Arare Iran Sheti, because you have on the left hand side you have the Anubi sign, which stands for ANU, Anu, which means merciful. In the middle you have the Isin, kind of like the Isis figure, that stands for Arare, which means oneself. And then at the bottom you have the Ni sign, then you have the Ra, which stands for Iran, and in the middle Sheti. So he was telling you that he comes from generation of Tashiti, which is in Nubia, which was the old kingdom before the new kingdom was actually set up by Meni Okun, who was the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. So that's actually the new kingdom actually started with him as the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. And to my right hand side, this is actually Ramsey II. I think in one of our episodes we made a slight error. We actually identified him as Ahmoses the first, but it's not actually Ahmoses the first. This is actually Ramsey II. Ramses II is not his name, but we just called him Ramsey II to make it easy for you. His cartouche name is on the left hand side. You can actually see that his nose has been hacked out, like most statues are normally hacked out. They normally go for the nose because it's actually quite easy. You know, once they go for the nose, then they can actually remodel it to make it look European. This is what Egyptologists have done over the years. So this is Ramsey II, because his cartouche name is actually written on his chest. This is how we're able to identify him. We're going to show you how Moses himself actually looks like. But this is not actually Moses, but Ramsey II. And on the left hand side is his cartouche name. So we have the Anubi sign, which stands for Enu. Anu means merciful. Then in the middle you have the Isi figure, which stands for Are, A-R-E, which means a chief, a principal, or an elderly person. But it's used together with Ra at the top. So it's Arare, which means oneself. Then at the bottom you have the Ni, which is the water sign. Then you have the Ra, and then in the middle of it you have Sheti. So his full name is Anu Arare Iran Sheti. Anu means merciful, Arare means oneself, Iran means generation of, and then he uses Sheti, which is Tashiti in Nubia, which is the old kingdom before the new kingdom was set up by Meni Okun, who was the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. And to my left hand side, you can actually see a cartouche name. This is actually the cartouche name of Kara Ifa, who is the 5th pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty of Egypt, and he was the one who actually introduced the Ifa spiritual religion into ancient Egypt. He was the one who actually introduced it. At the bottom, you can see the Ka, which means to count, to read, to reckon. At the top, you have Ra, so his first name is Kara. And in the middle, you have the ancient Egyptian Yoruba music instrument, which was used to represent Ifa during that time. And then on the far right, on the right hand side, that's him when he was actually young. You can see the car at the bottom, and then you can see the snake, and then you can see the sun, the Ra, above the snake. And this is 1,500 years even before Akhenaten was born. So there was no religion called Aten. You know, the chief god was always Olong, aka Horus, from when Osiris died, who was the fourth pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. So since then, Olong has been their god. So, you know, ancient Egypt has always had one god and not many gods. And to the right is the falcon god himself, Horus. You can see him depicted as a falcon with the sun above his head and the snake coming out of the sun. So that is who Akhenaten, aka Akhenaten, have been worshipping. He's been worshipping all along. So he was never a heretic king. And then on the left hand side, this is actually the name of God himself, which reads Shepataki. So he's the fifth pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, which identified that the caste symbol was omitted from the Abdist king list, and we actually replaced it. So this is exactly how the cartouche looks like before it was hacked off by Egyptologists. So the cartouche reads Shepataki. So you have Shepati up, Shepati down, and then you have the caste symbol in the middle, which is put into the middle of the name, which spells Shepataki, which means larger than life. As you can see in this wall relief here, this is actually the names of Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. So this is not actually the name of Oremhem. Oremhem was a fictitious character and was fabricated by Egyptologists. You can see his cartouche name. He's also got two big cartouches and two small cartouches, which is actually very similar to his wife, Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti. There's two big cartouches to the right hand side. You can see first that he actually starts with Olong, which is the snake. Then he's paying a homage to Ake, that's in red. Then you have the bird feather, which represents Okun, O-K-U-N. And then below the bird feather, he's got the knee sign. And then on the left hand side, you can actually see clearly that this is Akhenaten's name. He actually starts first with the other name, which translates to many Okun. And then at the bottom, you can also see the bowl as well, because we said in our previous section that his name is also Mimo, M-I-M-U, which stands for the bowl. And his son, which we're going to show you in a bit, also bears the name Mimo as well. And then his other popular cartouche, you can see the hand, which stands for Akin, A-K-I-N, which means brave in ancient Egyptian language. You got the ant, which stands for Beru, and then you got the sun above that, which translates to Berura, which means perfect rising sun. Then you got the three lines, which stands for Aten, which means a returning place. Then you got the Ni sign, which is the water sign, Ni, which stands for exist, to exist. And then you got the Ra, and then in the middle of it you got Sheti. So his full name in this cartouche is Akin Berura Aton Iran Sheti. And this is a Yoruba name and not an English or Arab or that kind of nature. So you can see that what Egyptologists have done is they've created a fictitious pharaoh in order to hide Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. This is his cartouche name here. This is here in the walls of Egypt, and we're going to tell you where he was buried. This is actually where Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, was actually buried. He was actually buried in Saqqara with his wife Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti. This is actually the ruins of it today. This is actually how it looks like. So Egyptologists have created a fictitious character in order to hide Akhenaten's burial place. So Akhenaten wasn't actually buried in Amana because nobody was buried there. It was just a temple. So this is his actual burial complex. And Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti, was also buried here as well. This is the burial complex. Here, this is the ruins of it in Saqqara. And this is how it would have actually looked like. This is how Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, and Ifatiti, known to the world as Nefertiti. This is how their burial chambers would have looked like back then. In fact, it also had 3 small pyramids. So this is exactly how Akhenaten's burial chamber and Ifatiti's burial chamber looks like. They were actually buried in Saqqara. So this is it here. Here is Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. This is actually his sarcophagus. This is where he was buried. So this is actually his sarcophagus, because if you look inside, if you look outside and inside his sarcophagus, you actually find his name also written there. Akin, Wilra, Aton, Iran, Ifa. Egyptologists have actually even erased a lot of information in his actual chambers, because a lot of the paintings, a lot of the relief have actually been repainted. You know, some have been painted light skin. You know, his wife. They've changed the image, so they've made a lot of alteration even in Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten's tomb, his burial chambers, because they created a fictitious character called Oremhem. So some of the paintings have actually been altered, but he was actually buried in Saqqara, and this is his sarcophagus. 100%. This is his sarcophagus here. And to my left hand side, you can actually see this is actually a relief of Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. This is his son here. You can see the relief on the left hand side, and that is him. You can actually see him carrying his name. So you can see the bowl, which means Mimo, M-I-M-U. Remember we told you that his dad was also known as Mimo, and his granddad was also known as Mimo as well. Excuse me. So you can see the ball, which means Mimo, I know. And then you can see the ant, and they depict the ant sometimes with wings coming out of it. So you can see quite clearly. So the ant stands for Beru, and the sun above, so Berura. And then he's got 3 lines, which means Aten. So his name in this cartouche is actually Mimo, I know, Berura, perfect rising sun, Aton, a returning place. And then you can also see Ra at the top of it. So there was no religion called Aten. And then on the right hand side, that is another relief of him as well. I can actually see exactly the same name. And during this time, he hadn't actually started using the name Tutu. He started using the name Tutu during his reign. But this is his name. And in this relief, he was actually 23 years old. You can actually see him just kind of like kneeling down. So he never had any disabilities or anything of that nature. Tutu Aton was fit. So he wasn't disabled or was using a walking stick of that nature. The entire story was fabricated. He was not a boy king. He took the throne at the age of 28 years old. The walking stick that they actually found in his tomb was when he was old. So he had no disability. And to my left hand side, you can also see another relief of Mimo Wilra Aton, aka Tutankhamun. You can see him actually, you can see the sun above his head. And this is where they said that he was worshipping Aten. So if he was worshipping Aten, why is Ra above his head? And you can also see his name inside the relief as well. And then on the right hand side, this is actually his chariot. So you can see his head attached to an animal, and him stamping on his enemy. And then just to the side is his cartouche name, which reads Mimo Bewura Aton. So that's his name. So there was no religion, like we said, called Aten. It was entirely fabricated by Egyptologists. This is Tutankhamun, aka Tutankhamun here. On the left is him, and then on the right is him as well. You know, reliefs like this you don't get to see because Egyptologists have a lot to hide. And to my left-hand side, you can actually see his chair. This is actually the back of Mimo Bewura Aton, aka Tutankhamun. This is actually his chair here on my left-hand side. And you can actually see at the back of the chair, this was actually still in Amana, known during this period as Aki Aten Temple. This was during that period, and you can see not one, not two, not three, but 4 snakes with the sun above its head. So this is a representation of Olorun, aka Horus, and he's also got his name written on it. Can you see? So this is actually Tutu Aten's birth name. Then later on he took the name Tutu Mira Moshe. That's exactly what happened. And then on the right hand side you can also see a relief of him and his wife. At this stage his wife was actually consoling him. His mom had just passed away. He was 23 years old, and in the middle is his cartouche name, and above you can also see Ra as well. So there was no religion called Aten, because where was his name, or what is his name when he was worshipping Aten, and what is his name when he was worshipping Amun? Can you see? So that story was completely fabricated by Egyptologists. And to my right hand side, this is actually Mimo Bewura Aton, who later took the name Tutu Mira Moshe, aka Tutankhamun. This is him on my right hand side. You can actually see him clearly. He's jet black, and his name, as his name suggests, he is a Yoruba pharaoh as well. He is, because back in those days, pharaohs were bare-chested, so they wore no top. So you can see him quite clearly. He looks jet black because of the sun. So there was no religion called Aten. And if this is Tutankhamun, then it is obvious, logic will tell you that his father and his mother are also black Africans as well. So we have this image on the left hand side, which Egyptologists say that he's Tutankhamun. You can obviously tell that this bust is fake, because how can he turn from when he was young, how can he turn from a light-skinned fella to a dark-skinned fella when he was 28 years old when he took the throne? So he was never a boy king. This bust here on my left hand side is fake. And to my left hand side, this is actually Tutu Aten's wife, and to the right is her bust as well. You can actually see how on the right hand side in gold, you can see how beautiful she was. Statues like this or relief like this you don't get to see because Egyptologists have a lot to hide. She's actually more beautiful than the fake Nefertiti bust that was fabricated in Germany. You can see her. She's more beautiful even than Nefertiti herself. She was a very, very beautiful woman. You can see her on the right hand side. This is Mira Aton, who later took the name Tutu Mira Moshe. This is his wife on the right hand side. You can see how beautiful she is. But statues like this or busts like this, you don't get to see often. Like we said, Egyptologists have a lot to hide because the entire ancient Egyptian dynasty is 100% black, 100% Yoruba. All the statues that you see out there, which looks like white or looks like Arab, are fake. They were all made in their fake factories where they manufacture these fake artifacts and fake busts and fake whatever they want to bring out to the public. Now, to my left hand side, you can actually see a cartouche name. Now, the cartouche name of this pharaoh, he was the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, aka Ahmoses. And then on the right hand side, you can actually see his axe. Back in ancient Egypt, this pharaoh had a lot of axe. He actually used to carry so many axes with him. He loved axe. He most probably had about 100 axes. They just used to design axe for him. Day after day, he was in love with axe. That is why the ancient Egyptian population nicknamed him K. That was his nickname before he was adopted by his grandson. So his nickname was actually K. That's what everybody used to call him back in ancient Egypt. And on the left hand side is his cartouche name. If you look at his cartouche name on the left hand side quite closely, you can also see two cups facing down. So his name is also Tutu, T-U-T-U. And then just above the Black Panther, we have the bowl, which means Mimo, M-I-M-U, I know. And then above the bowl, you have Ra. So his name is Tutu, Mimora, which means I know myself. And then in the middle, he puts the Black Panther sign to represent Moshe, which means thank you, because he was the first to actually use the Black Panther sign to represent his name. And Moshe in ancient Egyptian language means thank you. So he is the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, aka Ahmoses. He was the first, and at this time, because his reign period was from 1570 BC to 1551 BC. So at this time, the Sphinx was still a Black Panther. It had the head had not been changed yet. It was still a Black Panther. So that's why he used the Black Panther head to actually represent his name, which means Moshe. And on the right hand side is his axe. And you can see his name inside the axe. And to my right hand side, this is actually Tutu, Mimora Moshe, aka Ahmoses the First, who is the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. This is actually his statue on my right hand side. So this is exactly how Ahmoses actually looks like. And on to the left hand side is his cartouche name. So this is to the right is him, and that's exactly how it looks like. And you can actually see he's got braids as well. He's got braids on his head. So he's Black, African, Yoruba pharaoh, as his name suggests, and as the bust suggests as well. So this is exactly how he looks like to my right hand side, and to the left hand side is his cartouche name. Here to my right hand side again is another relief of aka Ahmoses the First, who is the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. You can see him to my right hand side. He's Black, the relief is Black. He's Yoruba, Asian king, as his name suggests. And you can actually see him wearing an afro. He's got an afro in that relief. And above the relief is two Black Panthers. So like we suggested, he was the first to represent Moshe inside his cartouche name. And Moshe in ancient Egyptian language means thank you. And then on the left hand side is his cartouche name, which reads Tutu, Mimora, Moshe. Tutu means cold, Mimora means I know myself, and Moshe means thank you. This is where Ramses the First got part of his name from, which he is actually Tutankhamun. The relief to the right hand side, you can also see two Black Panthers above his head. So at this time, because don't forget his reign was from 1570 BC to 1551 BC, he was the first to use the Black Panther to represent his name. which means Moshe, thank you. And at this time, the Sphinx was still a Black Panther. Like we said in our previous episode, the Sphinx was built by Olong, aka Horus himself, during his reign. And to my right hand side is Mimo Biura Aton, who later took the name Tutu Mira Moshe. This is him on my right hand side. This is exactly how it looks like. And to my left hand side is two of his cartouche. So the first cartouche is actually his birth name, which reads Mimo Biura Aton. And then the second cartouche name is what he used when during his reign as Pharaoh, which has two cups at the bottom of it, which means Tutu. Then, Tutu, Mira, Moshe. Mira means I bought it, Moshe means thank you. So this on the left hand side is two cartouche belonging to aka Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was a fabrication anyway, that's not his name. This is his name on my left hand side, and he's actually Ramses the First. Now, this is supposed to be Tutankhamun, aka Tutankhamun's burial place, whose cartouche name reads Mimo Biura Aton and Tutu Mira Moshe. So this is supposed to be his burial chambers here. But as you can see, this is not where Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was actually buried. This burial chambers is a hoax, is a fraud, because for one, all you just see is what they've done is they've moved some of his goods from his burial place, and then they just put it into an empty tomb, because there is no picture on this wall, absolutely no picture. So Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was not buried here. He wasn't buried here. This tomb is a hoax, a massive hoax. And also you can see in the next pictures where you can actually see the statue, one to the left hand side and one to the right hand side. And you can also see this chamber. There is not a single relief or even a single picture on the wall, which they say was discovered by Howard Carter in 1922. So his chambers was fabricated. He wasn't buried here. The next picture as well, you can actually see Tutu Aten. You can see his statue just to the left hand side. And you can actually see Howard Carter inside his tomb. And again, not a single relief, not a single hieroglyphs on the wall. So you can tell that this was just a massive hoax for the public. He wasn't actually buried here. He wasn't buried. This wasn't his burial chambers. What they did is they moved some of his stuff and they moved it into this empty tomb to give the illusion that it was actually buried here, because they stole a lot. So they were just doing hide and seek. And then again, this is Howard Carter actually investigating what is supposed to be Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun's coffin. And you can see here again, there is no pictures on the wall. Absolutely not a single picture on the wall, no relief, nothing. So we find that Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun's burial chamber, was a massive hoax. It was a fraud, because he wasn't buried there. That's not where he was buried. His chambers is actually that of Ramses the First, because Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, is Ramses the First, as we found. To my left hand side, you can actually see two statues of aka Tutankhamun, and you can see to the left hand side that there is absolutely no relief, no pictures, no hieroglyphs, nothing. This is to my left here. And to the right hand side, you can also, if you look inside, there's no relief, there's no picture. There's a model of Anubi because they really respected Anubi a lot, who is the sixth pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. But again, if you look to my right hand side, look inside, there's absolutely no picture, no relief, no hieroglyphs, nothing. So we find that Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, burial chamber, is a hoax. It's a big, big fraud. And again, to my left hand side is supposed to be the seal, which had never been opened, to the tomb of Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun. I mean, this seal is completely rubbish. It's a hoax because, for one, if you look to the left hand side, it actually hasn't got his name written on the door. It hasn't got the name of Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, name written on the door. So this seal, as we find, is fake. Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, wasn't buried there. So it was just a massive fraud. They just deceived the public on a very, very large scale. That's what they did. Now, as you can see in this relief here, this wall relief here, this is actually in the complex of Ramses the First, because as we find, Ramses the First is Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun. However, a lot of alteration has been done to his tomb, but this is where Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was buried. You can actually see him, even though the painting has been altered. You can see him standing in between Horus, Olorun, aka Horus, who is the fifth pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, and in front we have Anubi, who is the sixth pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt, and above you can see two cartouche, which is his name. But if you look to the right hand side of his cartouche, you can also see that Egyptologists have actually omitted the they've omitted the two cups facing down, the two calabash facing down, which stands for Tutu. TU. TU. You can see they've omitted it. Then they've dragged the Black Panther down to the bottom. Then above the Black Panther, they've put the Ni sign there. Then you have the Mi sign after it, and then Ra. So you can see that even his name has actually been altered in this relief here. And then on the left hand side, to the far left, is actually his wife. Also, they've actually, because they've repainted the walls of Egypt over time, so his wife is not, she's not fair looking like that. Even though they depict her in gold, which we showed you previously, she's actually black. But they tried to turn ancient Egypt white, and they failed to do so. She also is actually an Ifa priest. So this wall have actually been repainted. You can actually see her. She's actually got a bird feather just by the side of her head. And that bird feather represents Okun, O-K-U-N, which means strength, ability, and power, which was first introduced by Meni, who is the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. So you can see Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, or Ramses the First wife, is actually an Ifa priestess as well. So you can see it. You can also see to the left hand side, you can actually see this is Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, or Ramses the First. This is his wife on the left hand side. Like we said in our previous section, Egyptologists have been repainting the walls of Egypt. So she's not fair looking like that, she's actually dark. But again, you can see the bird feather on her head, and then on the right hand side, we actually have a Yoruba Ifa priestess as well, who's actually got exactly the same bird feather on her forehead. So you can see quite clearly that the ancient Egyptian religion continued till today. It continued in Ifa, in the Ifa religion, up till today. So this is where Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was buried. But a lot of alteration have been made to his tomb. And here again, this is actually Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun. This is actually his sarcophagus. If you investigate his sarcophagus, which is to the right hand side, and it's actually got the Isi figure, like a bird, a wing coming out of it, that is where Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was buried. This is actually his sarcophagus here. So you can see it quite clearly. And if you look inside that passageway, you can also see along aka Horus depicted as a snake with the sun above his head. So this is where Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was buried. But there has been a lot of alteration in his tomb, a lot of repainting, repainting the pharaohs a bit light skin, so that will fit in with the Arab and Anglo-Saxon image of ancient Egypt. But they were never there. Never. They were never there. So on the left hand side is actually Ramses the First cartouche name. On the walls it's exactly the same cartouche name in his burial complex. You can see quite clearly that Egyptologists have actually erased the two corpses from it. This is exactly what they did in the Abydos Kingleys to along aka Horus, when they actually hacked out the car symbol from the middle of his cartouche name. So this is exactly the same that they've actually done here to actually hide the true identity of Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun. Like we said, this is his cartouche name, but it's actually been altered because the two corpses are not there. So they've removed the two corpses, they've pushed the Black Panther down, and then they've now put a knee sign above it, and there's no knee sign. That knee sign was actually put there on purpose because there's a huge gap in between. This is exactly what they did when they went into the Abydos Kingleys and started erasing certain information from the Abydos Kingleys. This is exactly what they've actually done here. On the right hand side is exactly how Ramses the First, or Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, who later took the name Tutu Mira Moshe during his reign. This is exactly how the cartouche should have looked like in his tomb, but they didn't know that anybody was going to catch up with them. So TUTU, we have the two corpses, which stands for TUTU Tutu, which means cold in ancient Egyptian language. Then we have the Misa. Don't forget who that was introduced by Meni, who's the first pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. And then we have the Ra at the top, so Mira, Tutu Mira, which means I bought it. And then in the middle is the Moshe, which is the Black Panther sign, which was first introduced by the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, aka Moses. It's here for everybody to see. So you can see quite clearly that the cartouche on the left hand side has also been altered so that nobody knows that it's actually Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun. So that's where Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, he's actually Ramses the First, and he also died around the same age as when his dad died, which was around 62 to 63 years old. To my left hand side, to the far left, is the cartouche name of aka Moses the First, and next to him is his statue. And then on the right hand side, we also have the cartouche name of Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, who later took the name Tutu Mira Moshe. And next to the cartouche name is an image of him. That's exactly how he looks like. So to the left, we have two cups, which stands for Tutu. Then we have the bowl, which means Mimo, I know. Then we have Ra at the top, so Mimora, which means I know myself. And in the middle, he uses Moshe to represent the Black Panther. On the right hand side, Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, who later took the name Tutu, Mira, Moshe. You can see that the cartouche are very, very similar. In the history of ancient Egypt, there's only been two pharaohs who have actually represented themselves with the cartouche inside their name and with the Black Panther inside their cartouche name. Only two pharaohs have done that in the entire history of ancient Egypt, and that is the pharaoh to my left hand side, who is the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, known as Mimora Tutu, Mimora Moshe, aka Moses the First. And then the second pharaoh right here to use the Black Panther sign is Ramses the First, who is Tutu Aten, aka Tutankhamun, on my right hand side. And you can see he reigned from 1570 BC to 1551 BC, aka Moses the First. And then on the right hand side, this is Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun. And he was actually on the throne for 31 years, because he ruled from 1323 BC to 1292 BC. So he actually died. He didn't die at the age of, he actually died at the age of 59 years old. Just like his mom, she died at 58. So he died just 1 year older. He died at 59 years old. So he was on the throne for 31 years. So he was never boy king. The story of the boy king was fabricated by Egyptologists, because they should show us what Tutu Aten's name was when he was worshipping Aten, and what his name was when he was worshipping Ra. So all those stories were rubbish and were fabricated by Egyptologists. Now, this is exactly how a Black Panther roars. When a Black Panther roars, it goes Ra. So that is the history of Ra before Ra was used as a sun god. So the Sphinx was originally a Black Panther. Here on my left hand side is how a Black Panther rolls. Here is actually a clear picture of Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, or Ramses the First. This is actually his burial chamber, and you can see quite clearly this is his sarcophagus. His sarcophagus looks very similar to his dad. So the discovery by Howard Carter of Tutankhamun in 1922 was a fraud. This is where Tutu Aten, known to the world as Tutankhamun, was buried. Tutu Aten, or Tutu Mira Moshe, is Ramses the First, and Ramses the First is not actually his name. That name was invented by Egyptologists. This is where he was buried. If you investigate the sarcophagus, his name is also written there as well. So that there's no delusion here, we want to make sure that you know who the last 5 pharaohs of the Abdus Kingdoms are. So on my left hand side is 5 cartouches. This is actually the cartouche of the last 5 pharaohs in the Abdus Kingdoms. So number 72 in the Abdus Kingdoms, aka Thutmose IV, whose face is that of the Sphinx. His cartouche name reads Mira, which means I bought it, Wimra, which means perfect rising sun, Aton, which means a returning place. Number 73 on the Abdus Kingdoms is his son, whose cartouche name reads Mimo. I know, Arare, which means oneself. He's number 73 in the Abdus Kingdoms. And his son is Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten. And his cartouche reads Akin, which means brave, Biura, which means perfect rising sun, Aton, which is the 3 lines, which means returning place, and then finally he uses Iran Sheti, which means generation of Tasheti in Nubia. Then number 75 in the Abdus King list is his son, who later changed his name to Tutu Mira Moshe, aka Tutankhamun. And then finally, Tutankhamun's son, who is the last in the Abdus King list, is known as Mira Arare, aka Sheti the First. So he's the first, the last in the Abdus King list. And to my right hand side, this is Augustin Maria, who was a French Egyptologist. He was the one who actually published the Abdus King list. He actually started working on the site in 1859. So he was the first to actually start working on the Abdus site in 1859. And honestly, believe you me, if it wasn't for this gentleman here on my right hand side, who actually published the Abdus King list, would have been in serious trouble, because it was almost like a divine timing for him to actually draw the Abdus King list. Because if he had got there even a day late, believe me, Egyptologists would have actually destroyed the Abdus King list itself. So, and he died in the year 1801. So 18 is Ra, 01 is A. So you can see that even his death was almost like a divine timing, as kind of like a reward. So we just wanted to put that in there. We just wanted to add an additional information for you. Egyptologists don't even know anything about this specific pharaoh. To my left hand side is his cartouche name, and to the right hand side is his statue. Now, this pharaoh is supposed to be Menchechenu, who Egyptologists say that he is official and he actually fought in the Megiddo War. Now, this pharaoh is not actually an official, but he's actually a pharaoh himself, because on the right hand side is his statue, and between his legs we actually found his cartouche name, and on the left hand side is exactly how his cartouche looks like. So we have the Ka, which means to count, to read, to reckon, at the bottom, and then we have Ra at the top. So his first name is Kara, which means straightforward, and in the middle we have the water sign, which stands for Ni, N-I, which means to exist. So his name is actually Kara Ni. So his name is not Menchechenu, and he was never an official. He was actually a pharaoh, and he's the 11th pharaoh of the 8th dynasty of Egypt. So there was no Megiddo War. This pharaoh, statue to my right hand side is actually a pharaoh, and Egyptologists don't know anything about him. So there was no Megiddo War. The Megiddo War was a fabrication as well. Again, this is actually a zoom in of the same pharaoh that we just showed you, who they said was an official in the Megiddo War, and there was no Megiddo War. That Megiddo War was fabricated. But you can actually see between his legs, you can see between his legs, in the middle, is his cartouche name. Of course, we have the Ka. At the top, we have Ra. And in the middle, we have the water sign. So you can see it quite clearly. He's black, and he's an Asian Yoruba king, as his name suggests, Kara Ni. Kara basically means straightforward. Ni basically means to exist. It's that simple. To my right is Horus, Olorun, aka Horus. You can see Horus to my right. He is the ancient Egyptian one god, and he is the 5th pharaoh of the 1st dynasty of Egypt. And you can see he's been depicted as black. To my left hand side is also Tutu Aten, or Tutu Mira Moshe, aka Tutankhamun. On my left hand side, you can also see him quite clearly. He's depicted himself as black. So the ancient Egyptians were not stupid. They knew exactly how they looked like, and that's exactly how they drew themselves and portrayed themselves on the walls of Egypt and on statues. So it was the Egyptologists who was trying to fabricate their stories. Left hand side is a relief of Olorun, aka Horus. So you can see that he depicts himself as a falcon with the sun above his head and the snake coming out of the sun. On the right hand side is also Olorun, aka Horus, wearing his double crown. Both reliefs were actually in his temple complex known as Edefo. So he was the one who built that temple. So this relief was actually in his temple at that time. And this goes back to the first dynasty of Egypt. And you can see he's got the double hat on, and then you can see the snake in front of the hat, and then you can see the sun above the snake. So this relief goes all the way back to Edefo, which was built by Horus. The temple of Horus was actually built by him. So this goes back to over 1,700 years before Akhenaten, known to the world as Akhenaten, was even born. So this is more evidence for you here. Finally, to my left hand side, this is actually Horus. To my left, you can see him holding the bird feather to his forehead, and that bird feather stands for Okun, O-K-U-N, which means strength, ability, and power. And then to my right hand side, you can actually see Meni Okun, who is Horus' great grandfather. He was the one who established the first dynasty of Egypt. And on the far right is his cartouche name. As you can see, we have the Me, which was first introduced by Meni. We have the Ni, which was also first introduced by Meni. And then we have the bird feather, which was also introduced by him as well. So his name is Meni Okun. Meni means a man or the established one. Okun means strength, ability, and power. And if you actually look at him very well, if you look at him, he looks very much like Olorun, aka Horus, because he is Olorun's great grandfather. And Meni's grandfather was actually the last pharaoh of Tasheti Nubia, known as the Scorpion King, which we're going to actually do another video on him as well, because we know about pharaohs, we know about some of the pharaohs who ruled Nubia. So his father, Meni's father, was actually the last pharaoh of Tasheti Nubia before Meni came to the new kingdom to establish the first dynasty of Egypt. So we're going to end it like this. You see, viewers, once the truth is out there, then the lie basically has no power. So we're going to leave you with the earliest and the youngest depiction of Olorun Shembataki Okugade, who is the 5th pharaoh of the first dynasty of Egypt. Thanks for watching.